I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. I'm joined today by the MP of New Brunswick Southwest, John Williamson. Thank you for being here today, John.
It's nice to be with you. And first, right off the top, congratulations on your 30th anniversary of CHCO. That's a remarkable accomplishment, and it's been amazing to watch how the station has grown. In fact, it's grown so impressively. I think I'm aware of its history over the last 15 years. So I know when it first began, it was a real fledgling one-man operation, and today it's just impressive, the scope of your news and commentary. So keep it up, and here's to another 30.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for the beautiful certificate we will hang in our hallway.
Well, look, it's well deserved. I know it's a big team effort here. There's the front of the office and the folks who work in the back office, but it all comes together. I know you put a lot of content every week, and keep it up, because you've done a great job informing, I think, people not only in Charlotte County in this area, but I think throughout New Brunswick and beyond. So congratulations. You guys have done a great job.
I think a lot of New Brunswick got to know us in COVID-19 during the
Yes.
COVID updates, which actually is a great transition for me to talk about your appointment to a new committee investigating the firing of 2 scientists from Canada's National Laboratory in Winnipeg.
That's right. So this has been long running. This goes back to, well, actually pre-COVID, 2019, if we can think that far back, when 2 scientists were at first escorted out of the building and then later fired. Since then, we've discovered all kinds of questions that we don't have answers for. And just to give you a bit of history, this was first really explored by a committee that I sat on in 2019 and 2020, the Canada-China Committee, which unearthed this and began to press the government for answers, because we discovered that these 2 scientists had very serious and deep links with mainland China. And somehow we discovered that somehow others gained access to this Winnipeg lab. Now, this is a level 4 lab. It contains some of the most dangerous viruses, pathogens on the face of the earth, and it's classified. It is a high security. Yet we discovered that over a period of time, there were scientists from Beijing, foreign nationals who had access to this lab. There were people with connections to the People's Liberation Army. Now, none of these people should have had access to this lab. So Parliament's been asking a lot of questions. Parliament was able to pass a resolution demanding the government release documents. Then the federal government actually sued Parliament to try to stop the release of that information, which is unheard of. An election was called in 2021, so when an election happens, it resets the clock, and we weren't able to pursue that avenue. So as once again, because of the Liberal NDP deal, but the compromise was the government agreed to set up this committee. I call it a working group because it doesn't have the powers of a parliamentary committee. And the 4 members of Parliament, of which I'm one, will work with 3 judges to determine which documents can be released to the public and which should be redacted. And we'll probably have discussions about that behind the scenes, because my objective is to have as much of this released as possible to the public, so we get answers as to. I mean, there's many deeper questions about this lab in Winnipeg had a direct link with the lab in Wuhan. We heard so much about. For example, Ebola was transferred from the Winnipeg lab to the lab in mainland China. Our officials worked with that lab to bring it up to a similar level 4 standard. Now, none of that necessarily is wrong, because cooperation happens, but there are, when you have these scientists who were suddenly fired, we don't know why. We don't know if it was because of espionage or other reasons, and we're determined to get some answers here. So it should be an interesting process. I've already gone through the security screening. I have a meeting in a few weeks with the other MPs, with the Privy Council office, to talk about next steps, and then we'll begin to review the documents with the 3 judges and see where we end up.
Wow.
So it'll be interesting. Yes, and I will be sworn to secrecy on the documents, but my job is to work to reveal them to both Parliament and the public so Canadians get an answer. And while I'm aware and take the national security issues seriously, I noticed one of the components is to manage the relationship between Canada and China. Now, if the relationship isn't working, I'm not convinced we need to kind of protect ourselves from managing it. I think we have to have an honest discussion about the People's Republic of China and how they're interfering with our country, whether it's on the espionage side or election interference, which we've been talking about also in Parliament recently, very publicly and loudly.
Right, and potentially these issues could be aligned. We don't know at this point in time. But obviously that was other news this week as well, with the interim report of David Johnston, the special rapporteur on foreign interference.
Yes, and that I think is fair to say has gone over like a lead balloon, watching the news across the country. So David Johnston was tasked by the Prime Minister to decide if an independent investigation was, a public inquiry was needed regarding election interference by officials in Beijing. Now, we were from the very beginning skeptical about this. The government did not need to farm this decision out. It was a decision they could have made and appointed a judge who has experience with national security issues to conduct a public inquiry. So we were very skeptical from the beginning. We were worried this was just a setup to get the government the answer it wanted, which we believe was no public inquiry, and that is exactly what Mr. Johnston has decided. What's remarkable is that all of the big newspapers in Toronto, which is Fortress Liberal, from the Globe and Mail to the National Post to the Sun to even the Toronto Star, have said David Johnston should not do anymore. There should be a public inquiry. As well, the opposition parties are all calling for public inquiry. Parliament has voted for one. And our big concern is that Mr. Johnston is just too close to the Trudeau family. They're lifelong, he's a lifelong friend. Now, he denied it or played it down in his press conference, but now the media's having a field day pulling up old clips of him telling stories about having dinner with Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the kids, and the Prime Minister, today's Prime Minister, talking about having dinners with family affairs with David Johnston and his family. So there's a very deep link there. He's referred to as Justin Trudeau's ski buddy, family friends. Plus, he sat on the Trudeau Foundation board, and the Trudeau Foundation, which accepted $140,000 from mainland China, was even mentioned in his report. So it's an underwhelming document. It doesn't pass the sniff test. It keeps too much information secret, and I don't think this is going to go away. I think so much of what we know about this affair has happened because of good journalism in Ottawa. For example, and David Johnston, he scolded the media for reporting on some of these matters, yet if it weren't for the media, we wouldn't know about it. For example, Michael Chong, the Member of Parliament from Ontario, his family was targeted by officials from Communist China because of a vote he took. That was 2 years ago, and we only found out about it because of good reporting from the Globe and Mail. Other stories about Beijing interfering in nominations and elections and possibly providing money to political candidates, again, from journalists, not from the Government of Canada. So in fact, the media has done a remarkable job of exposing a problem. Do they have the full story? No, of course not, because they don't have access to all the documents. But the idea that the media was wrong to report on this, I think, was an outrageous allegation that Mr. Johnston made. And I think it just proves the point that he's the wrong person for the job. Look, he was a superb Governor General. But the job of a Governor General is to make Canadians feel good about the country. The job of someone who's looking at election interference by Beijing is not to make us feel good about the relationship or to cover over problems that we have, because we seem to have some serious problems with mainland China, and they're going to be dealt with by assuring the Canadian public that we've got a handle on it and we're working to fix it, and by holding those people responsible. And that has not happened under the Trudeau government, and this story I don't think is going to go away. I mean, my involvement with the Winnipeg lab is a second story. It's not related to Chinese interference, but it just shows you that there's a lot going on behind the scenes here, and Parliament and parliamentarians are working hard. So are a lot of journalists to get some answers, because the government's just not been forthcoming.
At the stage we're at in the online era, foreign interference can obviously happen in so many different ways. How do you explain that to the average Canadian, though, about why a country like China might want to interfere? We might think, oh, that seems so distant. Why would they care about interfering in a Canadian election? But there are many reasons why.
Well, I think it's because what Canada does at home and around the world, it matters. Our voice matters, and if we're able to, if a foreign government is able to influence decisions that are made in this country, it has an impact both on our well-being, our security, but also how we interact with other countries around the world. And I think we should take allegations of Chinese interference as seriously as we take them about Russia. Russia has been a bad actor, certainly by invading Ukraine. They've shown who they are, but the potential threat from China is I believe more serious because of their size, their wealth, and their abilities. And it's one that we have to get a handle on. And I think on this issue, I actually think the public is way ahead of lawmakers in Ottawa. They recognize and they understand that something's not right with the relationship, and the solution is not to go quiet about it. Is not just to roll over or to kowtow to officials to Beijing, but to assert ourselves. Right. I mean, I want to have good relations with countries around the world, but it's a two-way street, and when you have a country that is targeting members of parliament, trying to influence elections, look, Beijing was quite, it's been revealed they wanted two things in the last election. They wanted for Conservatives not to win and the Liberals to be held to a minority. Now, both those things happened. Now, I don't believe the election was falsely won by Justin Trudeau. He won fair and square. Now, he did get fewer votes than Conservatives, but in this system, it's by the number of seats you win. But what I do know is that some Conservative members of Parliament were defeated in British Columbia, and Beijing had a heavy hand in those elections. And there's a lot of work to do to find out what happened and how we prevent them from interfering in how Canadians cast their vote. And you look at some of the top line evidence, not like we saw a lot of people switching from voting Conservative to voting Liberal in these ridings. They just didn't vote. Okay. And that tells us something, like why in some ridings did the number of people voting drop off? There was something going on where elsewhere the voting level stayed consistent. So a lot of questions, too much meddling. I think China needs to be reminded that it can run its country however it likes, but this is a democracy, and Canadians will decide elections without interference from foreign countries.
And to paint a fuller picture for Canadians, why would that Trudeau minority government benefit China?
I think it's because it's a bit destabilizing. I mean, parliaments, when they're a minority, they're a little less effective. They're on their back heel a little more. When you're a majority government, you have 4 years to govern. And don't forget, there were also challenges in the relationship, even under the Liberals, with the two Michaels who were being detained. So, I think it will take someone smarter than me to understand the thinking coming out of the Politburo in China. But I suspect it was just to kind of keep the country a little bit destabilized and focused on domestic issues more than international issues. I'm just speculating on that, but I just found the top line interesting. Like, the People's Republic of China had taken a position on what they wanted, and then of course, worse, they boasted about it. Some of their embassy officials not in Ottawa, but in some of the other cities, were boasting about the success they'd had in that election and influencing at some level. So they even after the fact, they weren't very smart about just staying quiet about it. There was some boastfulness going on because, look, one of my former colleagues, Kenny Chu, he was a member of Parliament from Vancouver area. He's conservative. He was very critical of what he saw coming out of the totalitarian country, and wanted to make sure that Canadians, particularly Canadians of Chinese heritage, were protected. And he was targeted for that by officials. This is something that CSIS has reported, and it's one of the ridings that we saw a huge drop off in the number of voters, and that certainly had an impact. Did it sway it? I can't say that for sure, but the fact that a foreign country was involved in an election in this country is outrageous and should concern, I think, every Canadian across the country. And I think a lot of people are bothered by it.
Mm-hmm. And what will be, after this interim report that came out, what's the next step in looking into it?
Well, so Mr. Johnston is proposing another report in the fall on ways to improve the reporting, the flow of information. He's planning to have public hearings for people who have been targeted by officials from mainland China, can speak and talk about it. But a lot of these groups also think we need a public inquiry where people are sworn in, testimony is given, people are cross-examined. Mr. Johnston is going to put on a show that's going to go across the country, but who's going to stand out and speak about their experience when the diplomats from mainland China would be able to watch it? They have diplomatic immunity, and the same people that have harassed them are seeing there's going to be no repercussions on what they do. Like, we need something more serious than this. This is not just a show to make people feel better or to have their voices heard. We've been doing that. Parliament and the Canada-China Committee has been hearing from some of these democracy activists, people who are passionate about reforming and influencing what happens in China and exposing what's happening with the Uyghurs, for example, or the rights that are being suppressed in Hong Kong and elsewhere. They should be able to do that in this country without being harassed or targeted by officials, diplomatic officials from mainland China, and certainly without having their families harassed back in China as well. So his plan is to come up with another report, but I don't. We're not impressed. We need an independent public inquiry run by a judge who has experience in national security issues, who can review the evidence and make some weighty decisions. And Mr. Johnston is just not up to the job. So he'll continue, but we're going to keep calling for that. And today, and I'm sure into next week, we'll be pressing Jagmeet Singh and the NDP to really, if it comes to it, to break up this arrangement they have with the Liberals. He has the power to say, call an independent inquiry, or we're not going to support your government anymore, Mr. Trudeau. That would, I think, deliver results, but I don't know if he's going to do that. So we'll see. But the pressure's on, and I think the media is not going to stop as well.
And I am very curious to also follow your committee investigating the firing of the two scientists. So what are the next steps with that? It's you, 3 other MPs,
yes,
and 3 judges.
And 3 judges. I'll have to come back to that because, as I said, I have my meeting with the Privy Council Office. Privy Council Office is the office that supports the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa, and they're going to kind of lay out next steps, timeline. So I'll be happy to come back in the summer to talk about next steps and what might come out of that. I believe it's just going to be the documents related to what happened. Again, some will be released entirely, others might be redacted. Whether we put a report together, I don't know. I think this is about releasing information at this point, but I'll come back on that.
Okay.
It's a slow-moving process, so.
I want to talk to you too about the RCMP. It's obviously a federal issue. They turned 150 just recently, but we're also looking at dissatisfaction in a lot of communities, in particular Southwest New Brunswick. I think just because we're a rural space.
Yeah.
I was recently at the RC10 RSC10 meeting to set the priorities for the coming year.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of talk in Southwest New Brunswick about just that lack of presence altogether, especially as we're seeing crime, drug use rise in our areas too, where it's, you know, sadly really quantifiable when, you know, in St. Stephen we see 67 people that are unsheltered right now, many of whom have addiction issues, and crime seems to be rising as well. What can we do to make this a better policed part of Canada?
These are really good questions, and there have been challenges with policing in rural areas, Charlotte County, for example, for as long as I've been in this position, and I'm sure the previous members would say that as well. It's because of the size of our population, and of course the geography as well. We have islands as well. But something has happened. We've I think hit a tipping point through COVID where crime is rising, and it seems police resources aren't what they used to be as well. And I know that the RCMP is struggling to cover all the bases and respond to the public. I think they've given some good advice not to give up on the police and to continue to report crime as it happens, because if it appears there's crime is dropping because people aren't reporting it, that's not going to help reinforce the lack of policing that's happening here. So I'm very sympathetic with the public. I've experienced it, both my office where there was an incident as well, with the response times and the ability of police to manage it with all the other demands. But I have to say this, and I'll say this very clearly because I don't think a point's been made in the press. I also believe the police are in a very tough position because of changes that were made over the last 8 years by the federal government. We have a catch and release system where people now are released once they've been arrested, and a bail system that is broken. And it's not just me saying this. A few weeks ago, you had all 13 premiers from all 10 provinces and 3 territories writing a letter to the Justice Minister urging reforms to the bail system so people who commit crimes are actually held in jail. What's happening is that repeat offenders are being arrested, and I have seen this, and let go the same day. In one incident in my office, the same individual who was let go has now been arrested for assault in St. Stephen. This is happening far, far too frequently. Police are arresting, releasing, and arresting. It is whack-a-mole. We need, I think, as a country, to keep people who break the law repeatedly, particularly on a violent crime, to go to jail and stay there. There's an incredible statistic out of Vancouver where 60 people last year were responsible for 3,000 crimes. This is catch and release. It is a soft-on approach crime. So we can either accept what's going on here or we can change the system. And the Trudeau Liberals have dismantled the criminal justice system that we put in place over 10 years that saw crime decline, murders decline, gun crimes go down. It was still focused on rehabilitation, but it focused on keeping the very worst behind bars. And until we do that, we're just going to see crime out of control. So, you know, it's a question of the federal government needs to give the police the tools, and that means arresting people. It means if someone is arrested on a gun crime previously and they are let out on bail and they're rearrested, you don't let them out again. But the Liberals are doing just that, and that's why 9 police officers have been killed in this country this year. I mean, that is a remarkable number when you think of Canada as a peaceful country. It seems every few weeks and months we're reading about another police officer being killed, and that is because the wrong people are being let out time and time again, and it has to change. So I am sympathetic to the reason why police are overworked is because they're arresting and rearresting and then rearresting the same people, and that has to change.
Then you'll be happy to hear that the RSC 10 top priority of this is decided by council members, mayors, and the community was focus on repeat offenders.
Yeah. But if the federal government doesn't make changes, they can't do anything about it. I mean, Ottawa has sent the message to judges that if to orient them towards releasing people, and that is the wrong approach in some cases. And again, I flag that number out of Vancouver because it's so striking, but we're seeing the same thing across the country. 60 people, 3,000 crimes in 1 year. And if those 60 people were put away for crimes they're committing time and time again, crime will drop. And people who are committing less serious crimes will be released. Like I believe in rehabilitation. Like, no one is saying that 19-year-old or 20-year-old who breaks the law shouldn't be given a second chance. But when it's your 150th chance, I think things have gone too far. So the police have got a tough job, but understand they have to follow the laws as well. Those laws are being set by the Liberals in government, and we're going to change them.
We have 30 seconds left,
Okay.
if you can believe it. I know that Parliament will be coming to an end of session very soon.
I'll make a prediction in 30 seconds.
Okay.
I think we're going to see Parliament prorogue. That means we suspend Parliament and a new throne speech will come in the fall. But I'll come back here sometime in the summer and we'll see if my prediction has come
Perfect.
true, and we'll pick it up there.
That's a great way to end today. Thank you so much, John, for taking the time to come in.
My pleasure. Thank you. And again, congratulations on 30 years.
Thank you. My guest today has been the MP of New Brunswick Southwest, John Williamson. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.